This morning's session with Nick Ford, the Public Procurement Group, or the PPG as we call it, aims to use Scottish public sector's collective spending power to support a green economic recovery and promote procurement as an enabler for change. So Nick Ford, who's joining us this morning, will give us an update on these priorities. And Nick is Director of Scottish Procurement and Property at the Scottish Government and also Chair of the Public Procurement Group. Nick started that role in July 2020 and he's got 30 years of experience in procurement, commercial and project management roles across the UK. And also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply and a Chartered Global Management Accountant. So Nick's been busy. So I'd like to thank Nick for joining us and invite Nick to come in now and speak to us.
Thank you very much, Julie. And can I just also add my own warm welcome to everybody joining this morning. It's really exciting actually for me to come along today and speak. This is my first Scotland Excel event, and it's great. It's great that I've had this opportunity. So, and I hope actually that this is. I know there's probably a number of people I've already met in various meetings, but I hope this is maybe the start. Maybe a bit slightly further on than the start, but certainly for those I've not met, the start of what I hope will be a good relationship between myself and my directorate, and obviously you as local authority and public sector buyers. As we move forward now, we work together for the profession to really maximise and improve our impact. So hopefully you may have either heard me at ProcureX or heads of procurement event or a few of the other communication channels that we're using, and trying to increase the visibility really of public procurement in Scotland. And as Julie said, I'm a real believer in this profession. You know, I'm a career long procurement professional in both public and private sector. And I don't know about you guys on the meeting today, but I absolutely love being part of this profession. And when I think about the opportunities that it has provided me, the variety of work that it's given me, what I've been involved in over the years, but I think it's fair to say, more importantly, above all of that, is the difference that we make, not just to our customers or organisations that we work for, but even more so, and you guys will know this more than me in what you do, but to the communities that we work in and obviously the communities that we live in. If you could, Alex, just pop the slide up. So I always think it's good just on that vein, just to kind of remind us just of actually the impact of what we do and what we make. And here's just a very quick high level slide of some of those big picture outcomes that we deliver across the Scottish public sector, or should I think more rightly say that you deliver across the Scottish public sector. And these have been taken, extracted from the various annual procurement reports. And anyone on the call who has the job of completing their annual procurement report, thank you very much, because that enables us obviously to consolidate and pull these sort of big key impacts and outcomes together. So we should be really proud of what these show us. What I'm going to talk to you about today is three key messages fundamentally. One, share a little bit of the big picture, a little bit of early insights of what I'm picking up from ministers and sort of ministerial direction of travel. Number two, I want to talk about what does that mean a little bit more to us and our profession. What are the public procurement priorities? I'll come on to. And then number three, probably the most important, your role. Because to tackle the issues that we're facing, socio-economic issues, environmental challenges and inequalities takes leadership, and we are the public procurement leaders, so a pivotal role. If you can now, Alex, take the slide back down, pop it back on, my dear, thanks. So obviously, I don't think anyone on this call will have missed the fact that we've had an election, and no doubt there's probably some people on the call who think, well, it's a continuation of probably the previous SNP government. But I think it's fair to say, and I can assure you from my dealings already, I think it's not. It's different. It's a new administration. It's certainly a new cabinet. Certainly plenty of new faces, both around that cabinet table as well as in Parliament as a whole. And I already sense, and I don't know what you might be picking up, but I already sense a different level of pace and a greater focus, I'd say, on delivery and cohesion. And I think that's demonstrated probably more so in the role of the Deputy First Minister in this sort of cross-cutting role. And you'll hear me talking about this, and hopefully you're picking it up around cohesion and collaboration as we move forward. Working across the whole system is very much needed. So the First Minister has obviously got a very ambitious manifesto supported by a 100-day delivery plan. And we obviously, as civil servants and public sector, are now turning those sort of plans into actions and into implementation. Now, there's some big, bold commitments in that manifesto. Some of those bold commitments need direct action from ourselves to take and to help and support delivery of. So just a list, or just summarise a couple of those. So the Community Wealth Building Act. I think it's fair to say at this moment we're not quite sure on the spectrum of what that may entail, what the size and scope of it is, and I think it's fair to say on many of these commitments we still have not yet got enough understanding with ministers on what the scale may be. But it's fair to say what the expectation is here around looking for local authorities, public bodies to spend more in their local communities, to grow their local businesses, to ensure that taxpayers' money is being reinvested into local communities as much as possible. There's a change in ambition around Fair Work First. Obviously, we're already using that and consider that within our procurements, but how can we go further within the devolved matters that we have? How can we really deliver the full impacts of that policy? There's definitely an increased urgency around net zero and circular economy, more around kind of investing in families, helping people get online, particularly in the post-COVID world, helping sort of not just children, but those most vulnerable to be able to connect with the Connecting Scotland programme, and think about the complexities of establishing a national care service and taking forward kind of the recommendations and improvements of social care overall. There's also the commitment around a National Infrastructure Commission. Again, both of these, a National Care Service, National Infrastructure Commission, going to need significant procurement capability. And then lastly, and I think fair to say by no means least, is the economic recovery. How do we support Scottish business? How do we support Scottish businesses that they recover, that they grow, and fundamentally that they then provide jobs and tax revenues in Scotland? There's some of the big areas in the manifesto. There's many other areas throughout the manifesto that is going to need procurement action to support the policy implementation. And obviously, with an 100-day plan, I think we need to be getting on with it fairly quickly, if we're not already. We're dealing with a global pandemic. We're still very much dealing with a global pandemic. I think throughout this challenge, we've really stepped up to the plate. We've kept kids in school, we've kept care services running, we've kept our organisations going. So we've certainly played a part, but we're only in the foothills probably of the recovery. The economy is extremely fragile. Businesses have been hit hard. Jobs, and we're not quite sure when the furlough schemes end, what will be the true kind of impact on jobs in Scotland. We've got a climate emergency. Scottish government has gone far beyond most other governments at this point in time, and that climate emergency is going to require all of us to change what we do and how we do things. And then we've got inequalities made even more stark, I think, through the pandemic, but still almost a quarter, 23% of children in Scotland still live in absolute poverty. So think about those big picture type challenges. This is not a time for us as procurement professionals to be standing still. We need to be ambitious. We need to drive further improvement in procurement. And to our leadership, to our cohesion, to our collaboration with others, with policymakers, with programme teams, with ministers, with decision makers, with councillors, we need to be able to contribute to solutions that integrate change at both a local and a national level. So that's a bit on the big picture. Message number 2, a little bit closer to home in terms of what that means for procurement priorities. Understand what the government wants us to try and achieve. I've already had a number of meetings with ministers and more relevant with Mr. McKee, who's obviously come back as the procurement minister, and just to add kind of my own view on that, I think it's great to have Mr. McKee back as the Procurement Minister. He understands procurement, he understands what we're trying to achieve, he's really engaging and supporting, and he's very much encouraging us to go further and to push harder and to drive further kind of improvements and use procurement to its full extent to deliver those impacts. We've been discussing his aspirations, which fundamentally build on the strong foundations that we've already got in place, and that led prior to actually the election through the previous Parliament, but we finally published them last week, a set of public procurement priorities, which really look to kind of the next, I'd say 12 to 18 months, hopefully, not much longer than that when you look at what we're trying to achieve. And I'm really pleased with these priorities, developed through the public procurement group with the heads of procurement and with ministers. And whilst they're very much high level kind of delivery statements, they are kind of, I see them as a functional plan for us all as procurement leaders. So every one of you on this call today able to coalesce around a common set of priorities that we're trying to achieve. And these should hopefully flow through your work, your individual objectives, and into your organisation. And the ability that they really do demonstrate our commitment of using the power of procurement to deliver greater impact for the people of Scotland fundamentally. And so if you haven't had a chance to look at those already, they went live on the website. There's been a bit of communication around them. Please do take time to look at them. And as well as they're being good for the people of Scotland, they also very much support the commitments that the government has set out in the National Performance Framework, in the previous programme for government, and will be aligned with the programme for government that we're developing at the moment, and in the Economic Recovery Implementation Plan. So all those kind of big ticket items flowing through into what that means as a procurement profession. And whilst these are the expectation of what procurement teams in Scottish public procurement sector should be delivering, they also support the 4 outcomes that we're trying to achieve in the way that we place our contracts. So those outcomes that are good for business and their employees. Example of that would be the work we did with Alpha Solway in the build up to or in the early days of COVID for PPE manufacturing in Scotland. And actually now Alpha Solway is donating surplus fabric back into the Dumfries and Galloway community to help vulnerable people. Really good example of good for business and employees. Outcomes that are good for places and communities, like the work that North Ayrshire Council are doing on setting up community hubs to really help people tackle and work through the challenges that have been posed by COVID. Outcomes that are good for society. Great, the work that Perth and Kinross Council have done on community wealth building. Really, the reporting, being able to demonstrate what you measure delivers greater outcomes, and in this case, community benefit outcomes, which is brilliant. I think I also won a Go Award, didn't it? Last year's awards, I think, from memory. And finally, the 4th outcomes are to open and connected. Great example, Aberdeen City Council, the app that they launched to help connect individuals with social workers, and social workers who are supporting those individuals, but also those families, and particularly through challenging times of COVID. So really, powerful outcomes that you deliver through the work and the procurement activity that you undertake. Which nicely brings me on to the 3rd message that I wanted to hit today, and probably the most important of the 3 messages. Hopefully you've heard through this sort of the big picture manifesto, procurement priorities, what that means, what you should be thinking about, and then thirdly, what I'm looking for from you, your leadership role, our leadership role, my leadership role. I think we need to be considering how can we maximise the impact and leveraging in our contracting. How we can build best-in-class procurement services. I think we're good. I think we need to go to great. So that's the challenge. How do we build on what's already in place and move us from good to great, that we're providing those best-in-class procurement services to our customers? How can we really use our leadership and exert influence across key decision makers, across programme teams, across policy makers, to really ensure that we're influencing and engaged in the early stages to get the best outcomes? And then lastly, how can we really bring those priorities to life, those public procurement priorities to life? I've written out to all of Scottish Government's directors and all of the delivery bodies, the arm's length bodies and agencies, around how they can build these into the policy makers making decisions that they're working on and building. So how do we have them as a golden thread running through our teams, our individual objectives, our team's objectives, and our organizational objectives? Excuse me a second. Sorry about that. So what can you do? I think today's a great starting point. I think this week's a great starting point. I think when you look at the agenda, what Julie, Stephen, Sarah, and the whole team has laid on through this week, and still some more sessions to go. These are the big challenges that we should be discussing. These are the big areas we should be focusing on as a procurement profession. So I'm great, through this week, starting to think about that. What I want you to think about is maybe next week or maybe Friday, when you're back into the day job, a few things for you to consider. How are you using your diversity of talent? Do you have the right people with the right skills at the table at the right time? I hear so often procurement people talk about how do we need to get invited to the table, or we need to be involved early. You've got to have those right skills at that table when you get in, so that you're influencing the decisions, and you're going to be there next time around, and get yourself at that table to be building those decisions. I touched on professional excellence. What are you doing to build your own and build your team's skills? Skills you need today, skills you're going to need tomorrow, because it's ever changing, and we need sort of continuous development about progressing our skills so that we are the best professional excellence experts. I believe procurement is a professional role. I don't think it's a generalist role. I think we want professional career professionals doing this role.